Welcome everyone to our second Dunera episode of Cooking in My Kitchen. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you all and to hopefully demystify homemade pasta. Gnocchi is a great pasta to first start with if you haven't made homemade pasta before, because it's very few ingredients and there's no waiting times for the dough to rest or anything like that. So let's kind of just jump in. But before, I just want to give a big shout out to Sorel and Lisa Goldberg for organizing and coordinating today. I'm so grateful to be on and to be cooking with you guys. So to get started, we've got all the ingredients that I mentioned in the flyer. So I've got all-purpose flour, about 4 to 5 cups, and I just have some extra in case we need. I also have sweet potato puree. So to make that, I roasted 2 large sweet potatoes wrapped in foil on a baking tray lined with baking paper. The reason why I do that is because when you roast the sweet potato in the oven, it leaches out like a lot of natural juices and syrups, and you don't want that all over your oven. So make sure you roast it on a roasting tray. I've also got, and then I just blended it using a stick blender. If you're gonna wanna make this with regular potato, I'd suggest using like a potato ricer, but I'd avoid, do not put it in a food processor because it will turn to glue. Also, we'll talk about substitutions later on, but potato has a less water content than sweet potato, so you're going to have to adjust how much flour you use. I also have sea salt, and I have sage, and I have hazelnuts. These are skinned hazelnuts. You guys can see over there. I just roasted them on a roasting tray lined with baking paper on 180 for about 10 minutes. And then I have olive oil and honey. So let's get started. So this is approximately, well, I've measured it, 4 to 5 cups of flour, which we're going to put onto our bench top. And I'm just going to leave some aside in case it's already dry enough, the mixture. And in the meanwhile, I'm just going to turn on my boiling water so that it comes up to the boil. So I'm going to be doing gnocchi by hand, and that's how you make it. So I'm going to make a little well shape, and then we're going to put in our sweet potato. You can do this wearing gloves if you want, which I might do. Just plastic gloves. And I just wanted to show you guys, this is the skin of the sweet potato, which I peeled off. So you can just peel it off when it's cool enough with your hands, and you can either like toss it in olive oil and bake it or just discard it completely. I'm just going to get some plastic gloves quickly while we roll it. So I have some plastic gloves. All right, I hope you guys can see that well. This is our flour and sweet potato, and I'm also just going to add a little pinch of salt. I'm using Maldon salt, but you can use any salt you like. And then you're just going to cover the puree with the flour and start to mix it. It's seriously as simple as that. Now, the texture we're going for with the sweet potato is, you don't want it to be too dry where your gnocchi is going to taste too dry, but you also don't want it to be sticky. And if it's sticky, you're not going to be able to work with the dough like you want. Also, another great thing about gnocchi is you don't have to spend a lot of time kneading it like you do regular pasta. So that's really great. When I prepared the sweet potato, I told you guys that I baked it in the oven. Make sure that when you prepare your potato puree, you either make it in the oven or you steam it in the microwave. I wouldn't boil it because you're going to end up having the sweet potato be too wet, and it's just going to change the quantities and the ratios too much. So this is feeling really good. So like I said earlier, you can substitute with regular potato if you want it to be plain. Just make sure that you use a bit less flour than you would, because potato has a less water content than sweet potato. And sweet potato has got quite a lot of fiber in it, and the fibers are more apparent than potato. So you just want to make sure that, like, you kind of use a stick blender or you put it through a pass, like a sieve, because otherwise you'll have long strands of fiber throughout your gnocchi dough. And it will taste fine, but it just will look a bit different. And then when you eat it, you might taste those long fibers. So we're just going to knead this together. We had a comment earlier, can we discuss gluten-free options? You could substitute with gluten-free flour. I don't really cook with gluten-free flour that often, but I'm pretty sure the ratio would be the same. Just like you'd use all-purpose flour, you could use gluten-free flour. You could also try making this with chickpea flour, but chickpea flour is more absorbent than regular flour. So you might want to start off with a lesser quantity of flour. So I'm just bringing the dough all together, and I'll show you what it looks like when I think it's ready. Questions? How did you get the sweet potato smooth? And Carol, to quickly answer your question, yes, I am related to Eddie. He's my uncle. To get the sweet potato smooth, I used a stick blender to puree it. So the little blades in the stick blender kind of cut the fibers in the sweet potato. So that will ensure that all the fibers are kind of cut and it's a smooth puree, because it's those fibers that will kind of make it not smooth. Just checking, all-purpose flour is plain flour. Yes, all-purpose flour is plain flour. You could definitely, you could use a pasta flour if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. Lainie's all-purpose flour, just plain flour, not self-raising. Yes, don't use self-raising flour for this. Self-raising flour has got additives to help it rise, and we don't need that in our gnocchi. So you can see it's kind of sticking to my bench top just slightly. So I'm just going to add a little bit more flour. So I'd say altogether, I'm using the 4 cups of flour, not 5. Okay. All right. So my dough feels good to me. When I push it, it kind of springs back. You can have a look at it there. Try to avoid using too much flour if you can, because it will dry out your dough a bit. And now we're going to shape it. I have another question. Hello from Vancouver. If I use chickpea flour, start with 3 or 4 cups and add more if I need. I would start with 3 cups. Just know that if you're going to use chickpea flour, it will have a bit of a taste, but that's okay if you're happy with that. And I probably would use the sweet potato because, like I said, it's higher in water content, and that will be, it's also got a slightly stronger flavor than potato, and that will kind of mask some of the chickpea flavor a bit more. And when working with gluten-free flour, the gluten, like you're missing the gluten component that you use that you have in regular flour naturally. So the dough is going to feel different, and it will likely be more prone to falling apart. That's why maybe I would recommend first making it with just gluten-free flour that you buy in the store, as opposed to chickpea flour, because it might fall apart. So now I'm just going to start rolling out the sweet potato gnocchi dough, like you can see. And this makes a relatively large portion of sweet potato gnocchi. And the great thing about this recipe is it freezes really well. So what I did is I lined 2 baking sheets with baking paper. And then once I have the gnocchi cut and ready, we're going to be putting it on a baking tray and freezing it. The reason why I don't straight away put it into freezer bags when I'm making the gnocchi is because it will clump together because they're soft when you first put them in the freezer. I'm just cutting them in half. Sorry for the background noise. Okay. So cut it in half. Do we have any questions while I'm rolling? If you use pumpkin, is it the same quantity? It depends how you prepare it. If you prepare it in the microwave as opposed to the oven, in the microwave, it's going to retain some of its moisture more as opposed to baking it. If you do bake it, I would say you could start with the same quantities. So I'm just rolling it into more manageable pieces. And again, the quantity of how much this makes will change depending on how big you make the gnocchi. When you boil it, they're going to swell up quite a lot. So just be mindful of that. And we're going to shape the gnocchi without using a fork. The fork is normally used to make grooves, and the grooves catch the sauce. But I prefer the look and the taste without rolling a fork, but I can show you one as a sample. Any other questions while we're rolling our dough? I kind of like bigger sweet potato gnocchi, and then you can just serve less of them. I first made this recipe actually in lockdown because I had a lot of sweet potatoes in my pantry and I wanted to use them up. And I just saw how easy it was after making it the first time, and now I've made it lots since. So like I said earlier, once I finish rolling all of my gnocchis, I'm going to cut them and put them on a baking sheet lined with baking paper, the ones that I'm not going to be using today, and then I'm going to freeze them. And once they're frozen, then you can transfer them to little Ziploc bags and press out the air, and that way it lasts better and it's not going to all freeze together and clump together when it comes to boiling it. And the reason why I haven't salted the pasta water yet is because when you add salt, it actually takes a longer time to cook for the water to come to a boil. So I'm just going to cut this into big dumplings. Like I said, you can make them as big or small as you like. And we're going to be making it with an olive oil sauce today. Olive oil, hazelnuts, and sage. If you don't have access to sage, I would think about making a different sauce, only because, so you have soft herbs and you have hard herbs. So rosemary is a hard herb, sage is a hard herb, oregano is a hard herb, but flat leaf parsley, coriander, those are soft herbs. When we're going to cook the sauce, we're going to infuse the olive oil with the sage, and what will happen if you use fresh herbs is it will just wilt. It's not going to get crispy. You could flavor it with rosemary if you wanted to, but it's just going to have too strong of a flavor. So once I've rolled them out, I'll show you guys what it looks like. Approximately what size is each piece? I'm going to be cutting it that size, and this is my hand for a reference. So 1/6 of your palm, but you could cut it smaller if you want. Why are you putting flour on the sides? So I'll show you. When I cut it, that's what it looks like. It's still the sticky dough, okay? So you want to cover all surfaces with flour so that when you come to freezing it or boiling it, they stay separate. So that's made 12, so 12, 24, yeah. That's really good. Compare the size. My mum says compare the size. So this is an AirPod speaker case that's going to be covered in flour. So it's almost the size, it's probably half or 2/3 the size of an AirPod case. Do we have any other questions? Do you want me to talk about me more? Some people don't know I'm actually a pediatric nurse. I cook because I love cooking, and I love cooking for my family and friends, and preparing Shabbos dinners is just so fun for me. I love it. I really enjoy being able to cook unique dishes for my family, and yeah, I really love it. Tell me what you love about cooking. I also love that with cooking you can be a bit more rustic as opposed to baking, where you have to be a bit more precise. So like I said, I'm making rather big gnocchi, but you can definitely cut them smaller if you want to. So these ones I'm going to leave bigger, and I'll show you some smaller ones if you guys want to have a see what that's going to look like. And make sure you have extra flour on hand. Like I said, we're going to probably just be using the 5 cups total. I didn't need more than that today. But the humidity will also change how much flour you use, so just be mindful of that. So like I was saying earlier, I'm actually a pediatric nurse, and I want to give a big shout out to all our doctors and nurses that are on the front lines right now and that are working hard to keep us all safe. I hope wherever you are, you're keeping safe and well, and thank you so much for tuning in today. It's been a real pleasure cooking with you guys. Any questions? Can one halve the recipe? Yeah, absolutely. You just use 1 sweet potato and half the quantity of flour. No humidity in Melbourne. I'm sure not. Lainie, the amount of gnocchi would feed how many people? It's just going to depend on how hungry your guests are. I'd probably say this would feed 6 to 8 people nicely. Also, it will depend if you're going to make it as an entree or a main dish. And like I said, I'm making some big gnocchi and some smaller gnocchi. And obviously, the bigger your gnocchi are, the longer you're going to have to cook them. And we'll know the gnocchi is cooked when they float to the top of the water. And if you're cooking these from frozen, just cook them a little bit longer because they're going to be frozen to the core. So we spoke about substitutions with gluten-free and regular potato. If you're using regular potato, not sweet potato, just be sure to start with a little bit less flour. And make sure that you don't use a food processor, because when you process potato, I've learned the hard way, it turns to glue. It really becomes too gluey and inedible. Now you can see these are some smaller ones. And like I said, I'm rolling them in flour because the cut edges are a bit sticky, and that will kind of make the gnocchi stick together. I'll also grab a fork in a moment and I'll roll one to show you what you can do to roll it with a fork, just for a slightly different shape. This is a really fun recipe to make when you're not in a rush, when you've got kids with you. You can do it with your partner, you can do it on your own, and it's just really fun, and it's really not as hard as people think it is, and that's why I kind of wanted to show you guys today. It's such simple ingredients, and it's just really delicious. When do you add salt? So I added salt with the flour and the sweet potato. I used coarse sea salt, but you could definitely use finer salt, but I find that as you need it, it breaks down the structure of the salt. And like I said, we're going to salt our pasta water a little bit later on because it's going to take longer to boil. If you want to find all of my recipes, I have an Instagram account called Lainie's Kitchen. It's spelled Lainie NIES Kitchen. I also am published in 2 of the Monday Morning Cooking Club cookbooks. It's always about the food and now for something sweet. And most recently, I've been published in a cookbook by Jewish food hero called Feeding Women of the Bible, Feeding Ourselves. And I contributed a plant-based recipe for a Persian rice to honor the heroine Esther in the story of Purim. Comment what you guys are making for Rosh Hashanah. I would love to know. This could be quite a nice dish to serve for Rosh Hashanah because it's got the honey in it and the sweet potato is nice and sweet. I haven't decided what I'm going to be making for Rosh Hashanah yet because I just can't think about it right now. Can you put the sweet potato through a ricer if you don't have a blender? Absolutely. Looks like Play-Doh. It does look a bit like Play-Doh. I saw the other day a recipe for edible Play-Doh if you're making it for your kids and you're worried about them eating it accidentally or putting it in their mouth. And I think it was just peanut butter and icing sugar, if I'm correct. So we're almost finished rolling our gnocchis. And I'll grab a fork to show you how to roll one, okay? One step. So this is the gnocchi, and you're literally just going to roll it with a fork, okay? And that creates grooves. I'll try and show you. That creates grooves for the sauce to be caught in, but I prefer it without grooves. So I'll show you the size difference between the ones that we're going to be cooking and the other ones I made. And again, just make sure you roll it in flour so you cover all sides. So these are the smaller ones. And we're ready to boil them now. So I'll put them on a plate to show you guys. You can also see this is a regular sized dinner plate. Hi, gorgeous. Hi, Nix. Didn't see you put honey in. Honey is going to be in the sauce. So we're going to take this over to the other side. And I'll just show you for the other quantity that I'm going to freeze. This is just a baking sheet lined with baking paper. And for the larger gnocchis, just put them separate on the baking tray. Make sure they're all covered with flour. And like I said, the reason why we're doing it all separately is because otherwise they're going to stick together. Okay, I'm going to put those in the freezer and then later I'm going to put them in Ziploc bags, but we don't need them for now. I'm just going to grab the computer. Come to this side over here. Okay, you guys see well? All right. So the sauce has come to a rolling boil. The water has come to a rolling boil. So it looks like lots of bubbles are coming up through the sauce. Salt. This is my sea salt. Okay, one sec. And I'm going to salt it very generously. The reason why I'm salting it very generously, like I said, is because when you add more salt to the pasta water, it's going to help the gnocchi, when we put it through the sauce, retain more salt. I read an article about salting pasta water, and they did pictures of different quantities of salt, and the more salt they put in the water, the more it retained the sauce. I'm just going to pop them in. You could use a slotted spoon to pop them in if you're worried about burning yourself. And like I said earlier, salt it just before you're ready to use it, otherwise it's going to take longer to boil. So I'm going to be boiling about half of the total quantity. Pour off the dough. And it's probably only going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to cook, but we'll know it's ready when it floats to the surface. So traditionally, gnocchi is cooked with a burnt butter and sage sauce, but I've decided to make this dairy-free. So I'm going to be using beautiful Cobram Estate olive oil, which has got a gorgeous flavour. So the gnocchi is going to be boiling now, and I'm going to turn the heat on for my other pan, and we're going to add olive oil. So approximately 200 mils, but feel free to use a bit more or a bit less. Like I said, the nice thing about cooking is that you can be a bit more free-handed with it as opposed to baking where you have to be more precise. If you aren't freezing, do you still roll in flour? Yes, because when you boil it, you still want them to be nice and separate. Do you cover with Glad wrap or foil in the freezer? When I'm first doing the first freeze on the baking sheet, I don't. I just put it straight in the freezer as is, and then I put them into Ziploc bags into individual portions. And then when you want it, you're ready and you can just boil it straight from the freezer bag. You just might have to cook it for maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. Okay, so we're going to heat up our olive oil, and we're also going to add in our sage leaves. This is fresh sage, as you can see, and I've used the big leaves. Try, if you can, to stick to one size, because the more consistent your sizes are, the more consistent the cooking times will be. That applies to anything you're cooking, really. So like the gnocchi, I only am going to be cooking a smaller size, not the larger size ones, so that they all cook through uniformly in the same size. And also with my sage, I've chosen to use the bigger leaves. And sage is a really nice herb to be cooked through. So we're just going to kind of let the hot oil draw out the flavour of the sage leaves. And then once we've added the gnocchi, we'll also add our hazelnuts. And I'm going to add a bit of pepper as well for flavour. And a bit of salt. And you can be a little bit more light-handed on the salt when you're seasoning the sauce, because we've already seasoned the dough and we'll also season the salted pasta water, so you don't want it to be too salty. What quantity of sage leaves? I used 1 packet, which is 10 grams, but you could use more or less. If you're going to be making the full quantity of gnocchi that we made today, you could certainly add more sage leaves, you could add less. It's all up to you. I often make this with arrabbiata sauce as well, which is like a Napolitana chili kind of sauce, which is really nice. And like I was saying earlier, just make sure that you use the sage leaves for this one and don't swap it out for another herb, because the sage is a hard herb as opposed to like parsley and that kind of thing. So I'd just change the sauce. Any other questions while we are waiting for our gnocchi to boil? I'm going to grab a wooden spoon and just mix it a little bit. This will encourage the gnocchi not to stick together as it's boiling. Wow, they look so good. Where can you buy sage leaves? I bought sage leaves from the fruitologist in Bondi. You can buy it, sometimes you can buy it in Coles and Woolworths, and you can just buy it from any fruit or vegetable store. Any other questions about substitutions or the gnocchi? This is a vegan recipe without the honey. So if you wanted to make this fully vegan, you could just, instead of putting honey in the sauce, which we're going to do at the end, you could use agave if you wanted, or just a little bit of sugar. I add the honey to the sauce just to kind of balance the flavors a little bit and give a nice sweetness. You could definitely like leave out the honey if you wanted to, or you could use like agave if you wanted it to be vegan. And like I said, you guys should make this recipe with your kids if you have, with your partner. Do it on your own. It's really a fun recipe. So this is a slotted spoon, okay? Lisa from Monday Morning Cooking Club put us onto these, and they are brilliant. I use it for chicken soup when skimming off that first top layer of like scum and impurities. It's just brilliant. It's really, really good. You can get them from good specialty kitchen stores. My mum's passing me a smaller one. So just different sizes, but it's really good. And you don't need any fancy equipment for this as well. Often if you're making homemade pasta, you might need even a rolling pin. You don't need. And we can have a look if you can see. I'll just turn the camera down a bit. The sage is starting to become fragrant and release its flavor. That's what you want. You want the sage to infuse in the sauce. Sorry, one sec. So we're just going to let that infuse. The gnocchi is starting to come to the surface. Just going to mix it. Make sure when you roll these out, your surface is nice and clean of any like visible dirt or any germs. I clean it down with like spray and wipe and then wash it with water after. How many leaves are in the pan? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. About 25. So the gnocchi is starting to rise to the surface, and I can still see a few at the bottom. And when they rise to the surface, we know they're ready. I'll give you guys a peek at that. So that's what our sage looks like. And that's our gnocchi. So they're floating to the surface now. And once they're all at the surface, we're going to transfer them to our olive oil. And the olive oil will seep into the gnocchi and it'll become really flavorful. I'm also going to grab my honey and I'm going to add it at this point. Honey and olive oil are both ingredients that have a tendency to burn. Olive oil doesn't have a very high smoke point like, avocado oil or canola oil. So just make sure that when you're going to cook them at the same time, you put your olive oil on a medium to medium low heat. Otherwise, it'll burn and you'll just lose all the flavor. And I'm using Cobram Estate, the most peppery flavor. If you want to do this with burnt butter, all you have to do is put your butter, I like to use salted butter, in the saucepan, and you're going to put that on a medium low heat, and then what will happen is the milk solids in the butter will start to caramelize and become brown butter, which is called beurre noisette. And it actually refers to hazelnut, funnily enough, for coloring. So I can just see my honey is starting to sizzle a bit, and so are my sage leaves. It's becoming really fragrant. And because I pre-toasted the hazelnuts, I'm not going to add them in the pan now because that would keep cooking through. I used approximately 2 tablespoons of honey, but just adjust it to your seasoning. If you wanted to make this ahead, I would just have all your gnocchi ready and all your ingredients weighed out and ready. And that means that when you're putting it together, it'll all be like really clean and tidy. So if you wanted to make this fresh on the day, you could make it in the morning and leave it on a tray for the afternoon. You don't have to freeze it. I showed you guys earlier, sweet potato skins. I'm going to toss it in olive oil and also a bit of salt, I think, and maybe a bit of maple for sweetness, and roast it on a baking tray. Okay, so it looks like all of our gnocchi have come to the surface. You could drain it traditionally and use a strainer, but you don't need to, because when you're making a sauce, pasta water helps encourage the sauce to bind together and emulsify. So when I lift up the gnocchi, all those drips of water are going to transfer to my sauce, but I actually want that. If you drained it, you have to be careful. So obviously water and oil, when you put together, it can splatter. So just be careful if you have little children in the kitchen. Okay, I'm going to turn the pasta water off and I'll show you what that looks like in here. And that's our gnocchi. And I'm just going to let that cook in the sauce for about 10 minutes because it's going to draw out all the flavour. Be careful when it's in the pan, because when you toss it together, you don't want it to become mush. So it smells so good. You guys really have to make this. And like I said, I wanted to make this vegan, well, plant-based and dairy-free, but you could definitely do it with burnt butter. I really wanted to show you guys today just how easy it is to make gnocchi and homemade pasta. Would you reheat the gnocchi in boiling water? Wendy, if you want to prepare this ahead for that night or the next day, you could leave it in the fridge on a baking sheet lined with baking paper. But if you want to freeze it, 2 weeks in advance, then make sure you freeze it on a baking sheet. And then you're going to take it out of the freezer once it's frozen solid and then put it into Ziploc bags. If you guys make this, please send pictures. I would love to see it. If you don't have Instagram, you could send it to my email account, laieniecadry@hotmail.com. That's LAINIECADRY@hotmail.com. I'm just going to give it a mix. If you leave them in the pan long enough, the gnocchi will actually start to become crispy, which is quite nice. Some people add it straight into the pan and cook it like that, and it becomes really, really crispy. And some people also bake it. Your sound went funny when you added the gnocchi. I'm sorry, it kind of created a bit of a splash or boil, not a splash, but it sizzled. If I make it for my vegan daughter, should I cook the pasta or give it to her raw? You definitely have to cook the pasta. You just cook it as normal and you just would omit the honey in it. Yeah. So that's bubbling really nicely. What questions do you guys have for me related to cooking or baking? Are you guys reading any good cookbooks at the moment? I would love to know. I'm trying to build up a nice cookbook collection. Would you guys like another Dunera cooking class? If so, let us know and what you'd like us to cook. And don't forget, you can also access my recipes on Lainie's Kitchen Instagram page. So it's spelled LAINIES Kitchen. Are you thinking about making your own cookbook? I would love to make my own cookbook. It's definitely my big foodie goal. And I think I'm just in the process of collating all of my recipes and testing them and testing them and testing them. But I really, really would love to make a cookbook one day. I'm not sure how far off it is. I think probably another 2 or 3 years until I think about publishing a cookbook. But if that's something you'd like, then please let me know. And let me know what recipes you want more of. I would really love to know. So that's looking good. And just remember, the longer you cook it, the more oil that the pasta is going to absorb. Thank you, that was great, Shanatava. Shanatava Carol, another demo from you, please. You are a delight to watch and listen to. Thank you so much, Anne, that means a lot. If you wanted a tomato-based sauce, what would you use? Olive oil, basil. So you could definitely, first of all, you could make your own Napolitana sauce or chili tomato sauce, whatever you want. You could even use bolognese. I often make bolognese ahead and freeze it in batches in little containers, and then I like to freeze it in small containers so that you're just defrosting a small quantity. Thank you, Mum. This is a really, really beautiful pasta sauce that we've been using at the moment. It's actually kosher and it's got beautiful ingredients. We can have a look. The ingredients are diced tomatoes, organic tomato puree, olive oil, onion, garlic, salt, basil, chili. Really pure ingredients. If you wanted to make your own, I would kind of heat up some olive oil and dice some onion, tear in some basil, add some fresh chopped tomatoes or tomato passata, tomato puree, chopped tomatoes if you want, and just cook it down and cook it down and cook it down, because the more you cook it, the sweeter the sauce will become. And you could definitely add chili flakes or fresh finely chopped red chili if you wanted, garlic. The options are limitless with sauces. It really depends what you want. I made fresh pesto the other day with pine nuts and fresh basil, flat leaf parsley, salt, pepper, lemon. I'm trying to think. I actually made it a vegan pesto, so I didn't add any parmesan. And the reason I say vegan is not because I am vegan, but it's dairy free, and it means that I can serve it with meat. For anyone who's not Jewish watching or doesn't know, Jewish dietary requirements teach us that we should separate milk and meat products. So different Jewish people wait different quantities of time between eating milk and meat products. So if you're observant and you're Ashkenazi, some people wait 3 hours. And then if you're Sephardi, some people wait 6 hours. Chabad as well, 6 hours between meat before eating milk. So you guys can see that's my gnocchi. I'm going to leave it in for another 2 minutes, and then we're going to add in our hazelnuts and put it in a serving dish. Thanks, Lainie. Where is the recipe? Kathy, the recipe will be sent to you from Dunera, and it's also going to be on my Instagram cooking page, Lainie's Kitchen. And if you don't get the recipe, feel free to email me on lainiecadry@hotmail.com and I'll send it to you. Maureen Levy, definitely want a cookbook. Thank you, Maureen. Please tell me what recipes you really love. And we're looking after Lauren, don't worry. Lauren is our neighbour across the road, and whenever I have too much of anything, she is the first to taste it. Everyone who wants Lainie to make a cookbook, let her know. Thank you, Dunera. And I love the fact that you observe kashrut laws. So anything you do would be suitable. What is the name of the pasta sauce? There is no name for the pasta sauce because I'm including ingredients that I want. But traditionally, gnocchi is often served with a burnt butter and sage sauce, and that burnt butter is called beurre noisette. The brand of the tomato sauce is pronounced Aurelio, I believe, and it's available at Woolworths, Harris Farm. We ordered it online recently, and it's very good, and you can get it Australia-wide. Thank you. It is such a pleasure to watch you and that you enjoy cooking so much. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen. Is this a recipe that needs cooking and eating straight away? So like I said, you can freeze the gnocchi ahead, but when you're bringing all the components together, like boiling it and the sauce, I definitely would recommend making it fresh. You could potentially put it in like a mud bowl that can go in the oven, but you're going to want more sauce because the more heat you apply, the more the sauce is going to shrivel and dwindle. Thanks, Lainie. We miss you so much coming to Sydney. Shana tova to you, and thank you for the demo this morning. My pleasure. Okay, so I am going to add in the hazelnuts now. just to recap, in our pan we have olive oil, salt, pepper, honey, sage, and hazelnuts. I'm going to turn off the heat because the hazelnuts will keep cooking through, and so will all the other components, even though the heat is turned off. And like I said, you could make this ahead, but it's best fresh. So I'm going to be putting it in the serving dish. I'm actually going to get a better spoon than that. Hold on a moment. And you can double the recipe, you could triple the recipe. If you tripled it, it would make quite a lot. And if you wanted to serve it ahead, make sure that you add maybe a little bit more oil if you wanted, because if you're going to put it in the oven, then it's going to absorb more sauce. Yum, the smell, I can't tell you the smell. And please, like I said earlier, I would really love to see pictures of all your creations, gluten-free with potato. You could even make it with cauliflower if you wanted. I'm thinking of posting a recipe on Lainie's Kitchen for cauliflower gnocchi soon. You can definitely make it with a burnt butter sauce. And this is the finished dish. We'll come into the natural light so that you guys can see a little bit better. There we go. So this is our beautiful, oops, it's all spilt. This is our beautiful sweet potato gnocchi with honey, olive oil, salt, and pepper and sage leaves. And I'll leave it here. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm so happy I got to cook with you guys. If you have any other questions that you want to ask me, feel free to ask. And otherwise, thank you for joining us today. If you'd like another cooking demo with me, please email Dunera or email me at lainiecadry@hotmail.com. Or you can message me on my Instagram. I'm so happy that you joined me. A big, big, big thank you to the whole Dunera team. I think it's such a beautiful concept to have this beautiful little community growing together online so that we can stay connected even during isolation. I hope you guys stay safe and well. Lainie, so good. Thank you very much. Love being with you. Thank you, Maureen. That looks really good. Thank you. It is really good. And I hope to see pictures. Thank you so much, Lainie. Love the demo and look forward to any future video. Thank you, Irene. Thank you for a fab demo. It was great learning with you. Thank you, Heather. We'll send out the recipe via email tomorrow. It's from the Dunera team. And that's exactly right. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, guys.